Render Weekly, Ready Set Proto, and Tecomate Design have teamed up this week to bring you a challenge like none other. Have you ever been interested in using Blender maybe for some animation, or maybe you never tried animation before because KeyShot takes so darn long to render? Well, this tutorial is for you. What we're going to be doing is taking some of the models generously provided by Tecomate Design from their Kickstarter C-Tray campaign and rendering them in Blender. It's going to be pretty simple. It's going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned. Let's go. All right, so you got everything downloaded, got a little bit of an idea of what you might want to do, or maybe you just want to follow along with what I do. Let's go ahead and get started. So when I started Blender, I've got a basic cube here, a lamp, and a camera, and we can actually hold on to those. Sometimes people notoriously delete this poor cube, but we're going to keep it today. I want to move it down so it's sitting underneath this plane. So I want to press G, Z, and then holding Control, I can just snap this down one unit. That's looking good in the right place. And now I obviously want to create kind of a hole for it to sit in with an environment around it. So what I can do is press Shift A, add a plane, and since I'm working with all the default stuff here, it's kind of snap into the sizes I like. And now in edit mode, by pressing Tab, I can delete just this face. I just want to hold on to these vertices. So I'm going to press X and delete only faces, and then press A to select everything. And then when I press E, it will start to extrude these objects, these vertices, but I don't want to, I want to just scale them out. So I can just right click. That'll snap them back to where they were. They are still there though, and press S to scale this out. And that's going to create kind of that surface. So now I can press Alt and left click to select that ring, and then I can press E, Z, and I'm just holding Control again. I don't really need to since this is under the surface, but I'm a perfectionist. Let's keep it nice and even. Bringing that down, and then I can press F to fill that face. Looking good. Okay, so now I do have a little bit of a problem here where this is like super sharp, and I don't want that. It's not very realistic. So what I can do is actually add a Bevel Modifier. So if I go over into this little wrench modifiers tab, I can add a Bevel Modifier, and that's going to do exactly what it sounds like if you know what a bevel is. Otherwise, you wouldn't know until right now. This is what it does. It creates this kind of just broken edge here, and that's just going to help make this look a little bit more realistic, not quite so 3D. So with that there, looking good, let's also actually add this to this other object. So with that selected, by left clicking on it, I'm going to add a bevel modifier again, and let's kind of play with that value again so that we got something we like. Let's kind of see what it looks like under here. So yeah, it's intersecting a little bit. So let's just move it, something like that. Cool. I think that looks pretty good. Got a nice little break there, looking good. So now I think the next thing I want to do is actually add in that beautiful Tecomate C-Tray. And the one I like, let's go File, Import, OBJ, which they were so nice to provide. I think I'm going to use the number 60 here. If you saw my Instagram teaser, you knew that already. So looking good. Got that selected. Well, it's not looking that great. I shouldn't be so nice. It's huge and it's rotated wrong. So what we can do, if we press N to bring up our little toolbar over here, we can see that this is rotated 90 degrees. So I can change that to 0, or I can press Alt R and that'll just reset the rotation. Pretty easy little trick to get this all back to 0. And now the other problem is that it's rotating around this origin, which is like way off center. So I can just right click this object and set origin to geometry. Yes, and now that will put that right there in the middle. You can see that orange dot is the origin. Now the other thing I want to do is move this to the center. Could do it manually, but one easy way to do it, this little candy cane circle thing here is the 3D cursor. If yours isn't there, you can press Shift C and I'll snap it back to the center. And I can use that to kind of control where various objects and stuff are. So with that selected, I can press Shift S and snap the selection to the cursor, and that'll put the origin right on that cursor. So now it's still wrong. It's a little below the surface, but at least what I can do now is just kind of press G and Z to grab that up. And if you don't like using all those hotkeys, you can use this move button here, and you can just leave that on. And so you can just pull it up on the Z, and it definitely needs to be scaled down. So let's press S to scale it. Something like Something like that should be pretty good. And let's just set that right there on the surface. I'm holding shift to kind of make this a more finer tune drag. So cool, got that there, looking good. Now let's go ahead and set up our scene a little bit. I think we've got pretty much all the objects in here. One thing though, this is going to be, we know, moving up and down, and just to make it a little easier on ourselves, we want this to move with it. So with that selected, and then shift left click that cube, and then press Control P, we can parent that to the object. So now when I move this, that's going to move with it. And if I were to move this, you could see it's got a little leash there. Parents with their sea trays on leashes. God, don't you just hate them? So we've got that set up. Now what I want to do is go ahead and jump into a little bit of materials setup. So before I do that, let's kind of make our viewport work a little bit better for us. The way I'm going to do that is by just, I'm going to click up in this corner and drag over, and I'm just going to kind of make this, I want this to be a 3D viewport over here still. And then let's just press T and N to get rid of those. And then I'm going to drag in this corner again down. This will also be a 3D viewport, but I think this is where I'm going to kind of peek through my camera. So I'm going to press 0 on my number pad with my mouse in this area. And like I said, I want this to be a rendered view. So I can just scroll over here and set that to rendered, and boom, looking pretty good. Don't want all these overlays and stuff though, so convenient little button right here. Get rid of them. Good. So now we have just a clean, unobstructed view. And then this is going to end up being a shader editor, so that's where we'll set up our materials. Don't get too scared of that yet. We'll jump into it in a minute. So now what I can do, since this is going to be something we're posting on Instagram, of course, why would you not? We want to change the camera resolution here to something square. So over in this little printer tab, so old school printer, who prints things? We can change the resolution to not 150, that's a little tiny. 1500 I've heard is a good size for Instagram stuff. Now we're a little far out there, far out bro. So I want to, let's talk about something real quick. So in the C, a lot of the C tray branding, everything is very isometric. So I think I want to mimic that in the way I'm doing this little animation. So what I'll do actually is with this camera selected, you can see it's got this perspective now. I can change this to orthographic, which if you're an industrial design fella, you probably know all about that. So now when I'm in orthographic view, how close this camera is doesn't really do much other than I'll start to clip those objects. What's more important is this orthographic scale. So I'm just going to drag that down. I want to get this kind of nicely in frame. And since this is going to be popping up, I'm just going to bump the Z value up just a tad. Again, using shift to kind of make that a nice fine-tuned drag, and place that somewhere right about there. Just kind of framed, you know, so that we can have that nice pop. So that's there, looking good. Now, what did I say we were going to do next? Let's go ahead and, let's just do a little bit of lighting. Sometimes lighting's easier to do when things are all grayscale. So we have our lamp there. Let's actually hold on to that. Let's kind of find a nice, let's make this kind of our key, like our back. I don't know the nerd term for it. I'm not a lighting guy. Key light. I don't think it's the key lighting. It's like the rim light. I think that's the name I'm looking for. So let's move that over there, something like that. And then now my main lamp is actually going to be a sun lamp. So just with the click of a button, we can add the entire power of the sun. Shift A, light, sun. Ta-da! It's huge. So the sun lamp, it actually doesn't really matter where it is. What matters more is the rotation. So I can press R twice to kind of enter like a free rotation mode. And I just want to set it up to a kind of a good looking angle. You could set it manually. You know, this is something you could, you know, if you wanted to animate like a daytime animation, you could animate that value. But I'm just going to kind of play with this, get it something sort of cool, some nice long shadows. That looks good. Okay, so got that sun set up there. This is my sun. Yes. And yeah, I think the lighting is, we'll call it solid for now. Again, I'm trying to keep this draw fast, so I should probably stop screwing around. Let's move on to the next part, which is going to be setting up some materials. And now for the materials, I want to I want to mimic again what we see in the real product here. So I'm dragging down another window here. I'm going to bring up kind of a reference image. So I'm going to change this to an image editor. And then I have this reference image saved. This is right from the Tecomate page. So I'm actually just going to use this to like pick colors and stuff from. So what I can do, this is kind of going to be what I'm going for over here. What I can do, let's first set up these floor materials. So I've got that cube selected there. Let's so it's just called material now. It kind of came in with its own material. Let's change the name of that to floor red, and that's going to be our reddish color floor. So let's, what do we need to do? We need to, first of all, change the base color here. This is the principled shader, by the way, and it just has a lot of really good inputs for PBR, physically based materials, I believe is the term. So we got that red there. But let's go ahead and actually apply it here so we can just see a little bit better what's going on. It's kind of pale, so let's, one thing we can do is turn down the specular so it won't receive so much light, and then obviously turn the roughness up a little bit. That'll help darken it up. So now it's not getting so much shine. You can see if we turn the roughness down, it's getting like those lamps exactly. So, and that's, wow, that's so fast. This EEVEE render engine is really like insane how quick it is. It's just not even like updating. So that's good right there, roughness up. Now to make this just a little bit more realistic, I want to add a little bit of a texture to it. So maybe this is like a painted kind of like stucco wall or something like that. So to add that, I'm going to press Shift A and add a texture, noise texture. And to get that working, I need to add a Shift A vector bump. Click that, and this is going to go into the normal output. And this color is going to go into the height. And that will start to give us a little bit of a bumpy texture. So yeah, looking good, but the scale is kind of off because these objects are scaled differently. So what I need to do is just kind of have this mapped a different way. So with that noise texture selected, I'm going to press Control T, and let's actually drag this. There. Let's drag this over a little bit so we can see some more. So if you weren't able to press Control T, you're going to want to go into your user preferences and search for the Node Wrangler add-on. That's a really helpful one. So that kind of just created these mapping nodes, which is going to help us, map this material a little bit better. So I'm going to change that from generated to object, and that should smooth things out, make it all nice and even. Well, not smooth. It's like insane, like rocky outcropping now, and that's not what I want. So let's first of all, let's bump the scale up quite a bit. We want this to be visible but not overwhelming, so maybe something like that is going to look good. And this is just a procedural texture, so you can scale it kind of infinitely and it's going to look fine. It's not going to tile or anything, so that's good. A little bit strong though, so let's turn down the you guessed it, strength. Turn that down a little bit just so that this is a nice kind of subtle effect here. When you zoom in really close, it's obviously going to look a little funky, but from out here it's going to look just right. So that's pretty good. I think we're all set up with that material. Let's set up the second material, which is the one I'm actually going to put on the outside here. So with this second one selected, I'm going to go over here into the material tab and then just press this little button, and that will create a duplicate of that material. And let's name that one Floor Lime. I'm going to call that color Lime. It's like a yellowish lime color. So we're going to leave all the settings there. Everything looks good, but I need to change this base color. So I'm just going to change this, pick this color over here. And yeah, we're looking good. But again, let's maybe move the saturation up a little bit. And the value, let's move the value up. I want this nice and bright, I think. So that's looking good. Let's now move on to the next material, which is going to be kind of creating this silicone here. So with that object selected, it came in with kind of this default OBJ material. We can leave that since it's got a principled shader, which we know and love. So let's go ahead and start playing with the material that way. Now, our lighting is looking a little bit funky, and that's because it's probably time to go ahead and add some of the extra little pieces we need to make this look right. So this being a real-time render engine, instead of, like cycles, which would be kind of more similar to Keyshot, it does a lot of approximation, so we need to kind of help out Blender a little bit to tell it how to work, where to look for light and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is just add 2 simple objects. Don't worry too much about what they do, but I'm going to add a light probe, a reflection cube map, and that's going to look for reflections in that sphere area. So we just want that to kind of encompass our scene there. Something like that should be good. And then I also want to add a radiance volume. And if you see these little spheres here, or sorry, these little dots, basically what it's doing is it's kind of calculating the indirect lighting in those areas, and it's going to apply it to objects around it. So similarly, I just want that to kind of encompass my scene there. And okay, so that's good. So now we can actually go over here, and this is in our render tab, and we can turn on a few settings. So the first one I want to turn on is Subsurface Scattering, which you're not going to really see anything, but since we're going to be creating kind of a silicone material, we're going to want Subsurface Scattering on. And then we'll also turn on Screen Space Reflections, and then we'll also turn on shadows are already on, but we can turn on soft shadows, which will just kind of soften things up as you might expect. And we can turn on high bit depth too to make them a little higher quality. And then indirect lighting is really where the magic here is going to happen. So let's bake our indirect lighting now that we have these things set up. So bake indirect lighting, and that's going to start to throw some light around quite a bit more. And now you can see on this white material, we're getting a proper reflection from this green plane and stuff like that. So yeah, that's looking, I would say, a lot better. So back in my camera view, pressing 0, that's set up. Now let's go ahead and set up this other material. So we can rename that to maybe silicone or something like that. And let's we're going to actually try to reproduce this texture, and that should be pretty easy using just a noise texture. So I'm going to add a texture, noise texture, drop this into the color, and we're going to have the same problem where it's kind of stretching a little bit here. And again, with the Node Wrangler add-on, you can shift control left click to preview things, and that'll give you just a little bit better view of what's going on. So I'm going to do the same thing, control T to bring up these other nodes, change this to object. And then now I obviously don't want this like cotton candy color. I want a little more control over those colors. So I want to convert them. Yes, Shift A color. Oh, Shift A converter color ramp, and drop this in here. And that's, if we preview that, that's going to change it to black and white, which now I can kind of move together to give ourselves a little more contrast, something like that. Now, obviously, let's change some settings here. This is scaled a little bit too big or small, whichever way you want to look at it. And it's a little too jagged. I want it to be nice and smooth like this reference image here. So I'm going to change this detail down to 0. And yeah, that's looking a little bit better. So let's maybe now adjust this scale so we got this kind of nice big effect going on. I think something like that looks pretty good, maybe even bigger. And if you don't like what you got, you can just kind of play with these, play with the location here and kind of move that noise pattern around. Oh yeah, that's the money right there, looking good. Okay, got our cow texture. We don't want it to be cow, we want it to be colored. So let's just use the same colors we had before. I'm going to select that floor, and then hovering over here, I can press Control C to copy the color. Select my other object again, and we'll make that the white. So I can press Control V to paste it, and then similarly with this one selected, I can press Control C, and then select this again, and Control V. And we've got our colors in there. Looking pretty good. If you wanted to kind of make that line a little sharper, you could kind of affect the contrast there. Maybe pull it out a little bit. Just get it kind of how you want it. You can change the colors around, but we're going to go for exactly what we see here. So now Shift Control left click to bring that all back together. We've got our material set up, but it does not have that silicone look at all, and that's because we need to turn on Subsurface. So let's crank it up quite a bit. You can see now we're getting kind of that gummy look a little bit. There's some light kind of penetrating here. But the problem is it's like really white because the subsurface color is set to white. So we need to just change this color to be the same as the object. And now this color will be coursing through our object, and it'll look a lot more like that beautiful sea injected molded silicone. So yeah, that looks pretty solid. Let's leave that at that. Maybe, the roughness. Nah. See, I like the roughness being low because we can see our kind of lighting here, but let's make this sort of accurate. Maybe something like a 0.7. That looks pretty good. And if you need to kind of like press R twice to rotate this, take a look at it. I think it looks good. So now let's go ahead and move into some animation, and we can bake our indirect lighting again now that we've got some of those materials set up. Just to take another look at that. Okay, looking good. Let's now move into, like I said, some animation. So to do that, what we want to do is have this cube kind of popping up and down. It's gonna pop up, and then this thing is gonna fly off and flip around. You can do whatever you want. The principles here are gonna be pretty basic. So first thing I want to do is decide how long I want my animation to be. And for me, I think about 3 seconds is gonna be good. So 24 frames per second, 3 seconds. Do the math, bro. 72 frames, looking good. And so that's how long it's gonna be. So now I know. Let's go to my first frame here. Or sorry, let's go to frame 0, and that's going to be important for this to loop. And I think I want the animation to start maybe kind of like right there. So I'm going to insert a single keyframe, and then I want it to obviously end in the same place so it loops. So I'm right-clicking and dragging on this timeline down to frame 72, and I'm going to insert another keyframe right there. And what that's going to do is, there's going to be keyframes in the same place now. So now I just need to animate where it comes up to, and I want it to pop up pretty fast. So we're going to go to something like frame 8 here, and then move this up to maybe like that. Insert another keyframe. And now if we press spacebar to play our animation, for one, we can see that it is looping properly, which is great. But I want this to kind of hang here a little bit. So with that selected, I can press Shift D to duplicate it, just like any other object. And we're just going to have that kind of hang there for a minute, so it doesn't. So it kind of stays up, and then it goes back down. So yeah, let's take a look at that. Looking pretty good. Yeah. Okay. So now what we can do is have, even though this object is parented to it, we can still have its own animation. So the way I'm going to do that is basically the same thing. So right now I just need to take a look and find out where the pop stops. That rhymes. Yeah, that's beautiful. Don't lie. So what did I have it at? I think frame 8 or something like that. Yeah, so frame 8 is where we want it to release. So let's insert a keyframe for the Z location right there. And then obviously at the end of the animation it's going to land back there. So maybe let's have it land at something like right there. Insert another keyframe, and then now we need to decide just kind of how high we want it to pop up. So somewhere in the middle there. Let's move this up something like that. Looks pretty good to me. Insert a single keyframe. So now it's popping. It's popping, dude. But it looks really bad. So let's go into the graph editor and just change a few things around just a little bit. Now the graph editor is a little intimidating. This is kind of what sets the good animators apart from the bad animators, but I'm going to try to do this pretty simple. Take as long as you need to get this looking right, but basically what this is doing, you can see we've got this kind of like distance over time. So yeah, I won't get into details, but if we move this around, that's going to give us a little more, you can see it's, this is kind of like the full height here. So if I move this way up, it pop high. But so the reason it was kind of doing that slow pop is because some easing here, and now it's doing it on the end, but I want it to kind of slam down. So I'm just going to kind of set this a little bit nice, and maybe I can scale this out to give it a little more kind of hang time. Okay, so yeah, the pop at the beginning is definitely weird. It's like kind of, maybe we need to move it back a little bit. Something like that. Okay, so it kind of releases a little too fast. So let's kind of move this over a little bit so that it's a little more even. Again, spend as long as you need to on this. I think that's going to look pretty good for the sake of the tutorial. And then now let's just add that last little detail, which is going to be the flip. So I'm going to do that basically the same way. So with that object selected, we want it to start right here, same place. Okay, so we're going to change the, we can change either one of these. Let's change the Y rotation. So I'm going to insert a single keyframe at 0. And then at the end, I want it to land at the same place, but we want a full rotation. So I'm going to type in 360 and insert a single keyframe. And that's going to give us, yeah, that's going to give us our full flip. And it looks pretty good as is, but what you could do is the same thing we did here. Let's actually hide this Z location, and then I'm pressing period on my number pad to kind of zoom to what I have here. And let's have that rotation be a little bit more exciting. So maybe do the same thing, kind of have it pop there. Maybe not slow down so much at the end. Play with this as much as you need to get it looking right. Something like that I think is going to work decent for the tutorial. I'll probably play with a little bit more after. You should do the same. But that is the basics of it. Let's just for one make sure we're not getting any intersection here. So I'm worried that it's spinning too fast. So let's kind of zoom in here. Okay, so maybe like just a hair, but that's not noticeable. So yeah, I think we're pretty good. The whole scene here looks a little bit dark. I'm going to take this sun lamp, select it, go into the lighting tab, and just bring up the energy on it, like to, I don't know, some more, 30. And let's go ahead and bake our indirect lighting again. That's going to be a good thing to do anytime you're changing a lot of stuff. So baking our indirect lighting here. You can press spacebar to play this. Yeah, I think we're looking pretty good. Other settings you might want to play with that could be fun are the bloom, and that just kind of gives you some like extremely intense highlights. So maybe turn the threshold up here. You can turn the intensity up a tad. That's kind of just like a cool real-time effect. You can see this is without it. Yeah, I've got it turned down pretty low, so I don't think it works that great for this scene, but it's kind of fun to play with in others, especially if we've got some nice highlights going on. So yeah, that's about it, guys. I really appreciate you joining me. If this was your first time in Blender, let me know in the comments how I did for a somewhat beginner tutorial. I'm more than happy to answer questions. Usually you'll get your answer a little faster through Google, but anything I didn't explain properly or you're still having trouble with, feel free to ask me and I'd be happy to answer your questions. So now the last thing you would need to do to render this out is just basically go over here into your render tab here, set any output wherever you want it to go. You can change it to a video file, mess with this encoding and stuff as much as you want. But yeah, that's about it. And then, you just go up here into render animation, and that'll start cranking through this thing, and it is going to fly. EEVEE, this render engine, is extremely fast. You can see this is already on frame 8, 9, 10, 11. It goes super fast. So yeah, I hope you guys had fun. Again, let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if this was your first time Blender user. Would love to hear what you thought. And yeah, have fun. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Like the video, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching.